Okay, so we're going to talk today about keeping chickens. Chickens are the gateway animal for most homesteaders. They're fairly easy care, so it's a good starting point for a lot of people. I wouldn't recommend starting with pigs, for instance. Chickens or rabbits are pretty easy. So the first thing you need to decide when you're getting chickens is what breed do you want. Now, for years we went with dual-purpose breeds for meat and eggs, and we sold eggs to kind of try to subsidize ourselves. But, things have been tough the last few years. Sales are unpredictable at best. So we are moving on to rare breeds, and the rare breeds have done well for us. The chicks sell for more, the adults sell for more, fertile eggs sell for more, and then we can sell eating eggs as well. And all that's to try to make them pay for themselves. Because chickens, while it sounds like they should be, cheap and easy to keep, they're not very cheap to keep, particularly in the winter. So, we may charge X amount a dozen, and it costs us 3 times that to manufacture them in the wintertime, because they lay less and they eat more. So, but if you were homesteading for dual-purpose reasons, Rhode Island Red is good, Plymouth Barred Rock is good. If you're homesteading for multiple reasons, something like these Serama is even good. They sit on their own eggs and therefore eliminate the need for repopulating from a different source. You're a self-enclosed system then. They're small breed. They're the smallest breed in the world. They're from Malaysia. They're rare breed. They're worth a lot. Roosters, we charge $55. They can be up to $200. Whenever you're homesteading and you have a small animal, then it can be more feed efficient. So there is good reasons for doing small breeds, even for dual purpose reasons of meat and eggs. But the other 2 breeds I named are kind of the standard. We're moving on to rare breed, and we'll see how that works out for us in the making them pay for themselves realm. If you're just doing this for your own food, choices are a little bit easier. But that's just how we make it pay for itself. So the second thing you need to figure out is where are you going to get your chickens from and what age. So if you want to do like a purebred chicks, you can go with your hatchery. But do know that chicks have 1 or 2 chances at the most. And if they use up their chances, then they die. So they use their 1 chance in the male, because it's hard on their little bodies. If anything else happens, they're going to die. Whereas something that you've hatched yourself or gotten from somebody else that's hatched it, it has its 2 chances intact. So hatchery is not always best. You can also, for 2 to 3 times the cost of a chick, you can get an established chicken, a laying hen or a young hen. Your home flock should be about 12 chickens, 12 hens. They're not going to lay daily, only for a brief time. So don't expect daily eggs for their lifespan. You would be looking like at about 5 months old, most breeds are mature, and you're either going to see hackles, like the long feathers on these guys, come out, and they're going to start crowing, or they're going to start laying eggs, and that's a hen, when the hens have rounded feathers usually. So it can be economic to go ahead and purchase a hen that's already of laying age, depending on what it looks like in your area for cost. So each rooster, if you choose to keep roosters, can serve 10 hens. One benefit of keeping a rooster is the fact that, of course, you have fertile eggs. You can continue your own generations. And also the fact that they're going to, hopefully, defend the flock. They break up hen fights. You won't have near as much picking if you keep a rooster. You also have crowing, but if that's not a problem for you or your neighbors, then don't worry about it. So we don't keep hens past their laying livelihood. If you want them for pets, then fine. But be aware that at about 2.5 commercially, they retire hens. We have a video on how to check and see if your hen's laying, but the long and short of it is to take 3 fingers externally people. There's a pelvic bone back there, and see how wide is it. If 2.5, 3 fingers or more fit there, then it's a good layer. So you want to go ahead and keep those layers around for longer. I've had them lay up to 5 or 6 years, but keep checking them. You don't want them to be lazy layers. And if they're old and no longer producing for your farm, unless somebody wants them for a pet, don't move them on to an unsuspecting buyer. You need to do what's right for the buyer as well as the chicken. I know you don't want to, not everybody wants to cull, but there's other options. Egg eating, you want to curb. If we catch a hen one time eating her own eggs, then a lot of time older hens that have had broods will go ahead and start eating eggs. So if you catch her once, it could have been an accident. You catch her twice, then you need to get rid of her. Don't sell her to somebody else unknowingly, because that's not cool, guys. So what we do when we find an egg eater, we mark her with a wire tie around her leg very loosely so you don't hurt her. And this is her one-time mark. We red tag her. And if we catch her again, we go ahead and cull her. We also use wire ties very loosely. You can, although they've found they fall off, in sequence for telling what year the chicken is. If you have a larger flock, we generally like to keep like 35. And that way each year has a corresponding, put that in your farm journal, color, and you know what year she's from, so you don't lose track. But instead of just saying, oh, she's 2.5, get rid of her, check and make sure she's not laying. So if you want to keep multiple roosters, you can see I have multiple roosters in together in these pens. The best way we've found is to raise them in there with the father, whether he's the father or not. Raise them in there with the mature rooster. That way he's already going to be subordinate. Don't overwhelm your mature rooster, or the probability is that he's going to get knocked off the ladder and somebody else is going to take over. And maybe they won't be as nice to the hens. And take care of roosters that are too mean and aggressive with the hens. They are that way initially, but you can get by with letting them kind of mature a little bit, and then if they continue to cause problems, then remove them, because you don't want your hens stressed. It's one of the reasons they won't lay. So when you're considering housing, this is obviously a smaller house. This is actually, designed for full-size chickens, but I wouldn't keep full-size ones in there. These are small breeds, so they're okay in there. But you want a 4-sided shelter, a small door that you can close at night so they're safe from predators. You do want to use that because, believe me, you can have some losses. Fenced yard for their outdoor enjoyment attached to their housing, and small enough wire that, predators aren't going to get through there. Chicken wire, this kind of wire is okay too. These are just jobbies that you come in a kit. The whole thing is. But you can easily make your own. Dad made that one for us, and it works well. And that's a dog house over there, and that works well too. But again, these are bantam breeds. So a lot of people come here and they ask, why don't you just let your chickens go, or these free-range chicken eggs and blah, blah, blah. We don't free-range here. I've heard it can reduce feed consumption by up to 40%. But the problem is we have high predator population here, and also the hens tend to lay in the brush and stuff like that. You then don't know how old is the egg. And they destroy ground. So people say to me, well, why don't you move this pen around? I move it over, and this ground here, after a year, is still recovering, okay? Chickens are like bulldozers. They destroy everything in their path. So you can do a chicken tractor if it works for you, that's great. If you can move them along and they can eat grass and bugs and whatever, that's wonderful. But we don't have enough land to even move around this little chicken pen, because they will destroy everything. So the floor of your hen house should not be dirt, because animals will dig in. You want it to be wood or concrete. Now usually, traditionally, hen houses were cleaned out every year. We clean it out daily to keep down protozoa like coccidia. You of course can use your manure in your garden, but it has to be aged, or it'll burn your plants because it's pretty acidic. You do ideally want to have electricity in your hen house, just a 60-watt bulb, because chickens need 14 hours of daylight a day in order to lay. We keep our light on 24 hours a day so that they're able to see predators and be aware. Otherwise, they're kind of very vulnerable. That way they have a half chance if a predator does get in there and tries to maul your chickens, that maybe they can get away. So what we do for nest boxes is we hang milk crates on the wall by nails, and we add grass hay, and it works really well. It encourages the hens to lay in there. You can add little plastic Easter eggs if you want, and that encourages them to lay better too. Check your eggs frequently, because you don't want them to get over old, especially if you're selling them, of course, to the public. We check twice a day. So reasons that your chickens aren't laying is they have an annual molt, and after they molt, they will lay less. So it could be they're molting. If you've moved them, they'll stop laying a lot of times, and sometimes they'll even go into a molt. If you change their diet, sometimes they won't lay. Conflict in the flock, like that. So don't have too many roosters, don't have too many squabbles like that breaking out. That can induce them not to lay. Sometimes presence of predators. We've had them stop laying for weeks because they saw a coyote or something. Bad weather can induce them to stop laying. Lack of light, health issues. If they're cold or wet, sometimes they'll stop laying. So just kind of be aware of your flock's overall health to determine what you think is the cause. And sometimes they're just bored with their feed, and you need to increase protein. Sometimes some people say, and we've tried it with great success, give them soaked dry cat food, and it will give them a boost of protein. Find a good brand. Don't find a really cheap one that could introduce something like salmonella. We go along with Purina on that because we've never had a problem with it. Whereas some of the other cheaper brands we've had a problem with. So we don't want to introduce something like salmonella into the flock. So don't go with a cheap brand. Still fighting. So when you add new chickens, try to add more than one to your flock. That way that there won't be, when they act like a victim, they'll treat them like a victim, and they'll all gang up. So if you add more than one, there's multiple targets, and it reduces the probability of being picked badly. So caring for chicks should include medicated chick start. This prevents stuff like coccidia. Some people don't feed medicated. That's up to you. But medicated feed gives them a boost and a capability to stay a little healthier at times. Don't try to get by on just feeding them like table scraps, your chickens, or out and about. They need 16%. So you also want to take care of introducing too many treats, because you're going to reduce the 16% protein they need in order to lay, and that can be one reason they're not laying. Hens, a typical hen, like a Plymouth Rock or a Rhode Island Red, consumes about 1/4 pound of feed a day, depending on size and age. So you should be prepared for 82 to 90 pounds of feed per hen per year. So those are important considerations when considering how big do you want your flock to be, how many do you want to feed. We don't free feed. We provide limited feed. This avoids so many rodent issues, and also waste of feed. We use pelletized feed instead of crumbles. That eliminates a lot of waste because they have a lot of dust in the crumbles, except for chicks. And then you want to do crumbles even if you're not doing the medicated chick start. Whatever you feed is totally up to you. We just have our preferences and what we found worked for us. And then, of course, you can supplement your layer feed with all kinds of veggies and fruits and season and whole or cracked grains. Even you can give them meat and cooked eggs, clabbered milk, But just, again, be aware of how much you're giving, because everything you give that's less than 16% drives down the protein of your feed in general. Make sure when you're feeding them scraps, though, don't give them anything that's going to give them botulism. Be aware that, molds and stuff affects them the same way it does us, so don't give them anything bad. So there is an older recipe I found for laying feed, pre-pelletized. This was hard labor to root this out, because I asked a 70-year-old farmer I knew how they used to feed the chickens pre-pelletized feed. He couldn't tell me, because we were trying to go off of the pelletized feed. So I found an article in a magazine before 1910 Pelletized feed apparently started about 1918, which is why nobody knows what to do without pelletized feed. So the woman was recommending a rotational way of feeding of whole wheat, then whole oats, then cracked corn, and that way the hens didn't get bored, because a lot of the reason they'll stop laying is they're bored. So if you add in something like cooked rice, just as a treat, then they will pep up and they'll start laying. Even though it's low protein, they have to be happy to lay. So part of the way that they used to feed was to get that 16%. The grains used to be higher percentage of protein than they are now. The other way is that they used wheat bran. Wheat bran is extremely high protein, but do be aware when you're feeding it to young growing chickens, it can stunt growth. So there has a drawbacks too. You can add oyster shell and grit to your chicken's diet to kind of get some calcium going and get something for their craw to grind the grain with. So a lot of times people have their own ideas of what to use. You can of course give insects and stuff. Some people feed earthworms and things like that. But one problem is you don't want to give them anything that's going to bring about a problem with parasites, because some things like earthworms can induce them to have parasites. So some of the things that can go wrong with your chickens, primarily the worst thing that you're going to have a problem with is coccidia. It's protozoa. It thrives in an environment where it's warm and wet. So this is why sometimes you get a rain and then a warmer weather, particularly in the early summer, and suddenly your chickens look kind of sick. And usually it's coccidia. It's just really, really common with chickens. So their eggs hatch when it's warm and then wet, or wet and then warm. The kind of coccidiosis that infects the birds is not the kind that infects humans or any other mammal. Each animal has its own coccidia. So you can't get it from them, and they can't get it from you, and whatever. So the symptoms for coccidia, you're going to see your chicks not growing as fast. Watery diarrhea that sometimes has some blood in it. White, smelly buildup on the back end of their feathers where they go poo. They're going to decrease in their egg production, and sometimes they will die. Usually that's young birds, which is why we're using the medicated chick start. It's totally up to you. That has amprolium in it, which reduces the effect of coccidia. So one way you can prevent it is not putting your younger birds in with your older birds, because the older birds are shedding off coccidia eggs. Some say it immunizes them for the future, so if you want to risk it, you can do it that way too. So either way. Amprolium, the chick start, by the way, is safe for laying hens, so it's perfectly safe for you to give that to your chickens. We sometimes will give it as a boost because it's got the high protein in there, and if we have chicks in there, we'll go ahead and give it to them with their mother. The other thing that can happen commonly is mites. You can have scaly leg mites, which is going to present like a bunch of crusty buildup on their legs, and the way you treat with that is that you would take and put petroleum jelly on their legs, and then you can do oral or pour on ivermectin, and that'll kill that. Mites that are just kind of crawling around, the external mites,